Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy today's sermon by our pastoral staff at Christpoint Church. We also want you to know that if you have any questions, prayer requests, or need information on any of our ministry opportunities, you can email us at www.info@christpoint.church. We love you and we are praying that this will be the best year yet. Welcome home.
How well do we really know someone? How well do we really know someone? We need to know that we know that we know. So Paul talks about knowing Jesus. He talks about this, and he talks about knowing Jesus in deeper levels of hunger. So we're pretty much just going to land and stay on Philippians 3:10. You hear me quote this a lot. You hear me say it a lot. Philippians 3:10. That I may know him. Now he's talking about Jesus. Paul's talking about Jesus. That I may know him. And not just know him, but I want to know him in the power of his resurrection. Not just in the power of his resurrection, but I want to know him. The ESV says share in his sufferings. The King James says in the fellowship of his sufferings. I want to know him in power. I want to know him in sufferings. And I want to become like him in death. Now, that's pretty deep. That's going pretty deep. In case you don't, you're not really getting it. We're not lining up for this kind of relationship. We're just not. We're not lining up. Let me give you a little background on Paul. Paul wrote several letters, Ephesians being one of them, and Philippians, and several more he wrote from a Roman prison, and this was one of those. While suffering for Christ, he wrote these letters. While knowing that he's more than likely going to die for Christ, he wrote these letters. So, he was how frustrating. So let me ask you, how frustrating is it in our lives when we don't get what we want when we want it? I mean, we're just spoiled rotten. We don't get what we want when we want it. So therefore, I'm going to pull out my pistol and I'm going to go postal. I didn't get what I want when I wanted it. So why are you making me wait? So Paul was in a Roman prison. Now you got to realize prisons they didn't look like they do now. They didn't have like the metal bed and hanging on the chain. Then it was not that. It was more than likely about this high, and you couldn't stand up, and it was dark, and it was dungeness, and the word tells us he was chained to the ground with his feet in his hands, probably his neck too. So Paul's in a Roman prison, and he was in this Roman prison for 2 years. Now, I want you to understand the enormity of what we're saying here. He wrote this letter to the Philippian church just before he was released. That means he is in prison for the entirety of the 2 years, locked down, fingernails all growing out, hair all scraggly and all messed up. He looked like death eating a cracker. I mean, this guy looks like, he is jacked up. And he's chained down, he's bleeding on his knees, everywhere else because of where he's been. And he says, I want to know Jesus. I want to know the power of Jesus. I want to know the suffering of Jesus. I want to know Jesus even in his death. I want to know Jesus. And I want you to realize something with me. How many of us have the level of hunger for anything after 2 years of bondage because of that thing? See, he's in prison because of Jesus, and because of Jesus, he's locked down, and he's still saying, man, I just want to know more about Jesus. I want to know him deeper than I've ever, and he knows him better than anybody in the land. And he says, I want to know him more than I've ever known him. So, let's take a look at the depths of knowing Jesus. Let's take a look at it. See, I'm going to tell you, this is just the cold hard facts. Everyone wants to know Jesus. Everyone wants to, not everybody wants to serve him, but everyone wants to know him. Everybody's heard of Jesus. Well, heck, demons, they know who Jesus is. They acknowledge Jesus. Atheists will acknowledge Jesus. People who don't like Jesus will acknowledge Jesus. So Jesus is a popular person. He's not just a God. He is the God, the Creator. He's our prophet, our priest, and our King. He is our everything. But people just they want to know Jesus. Sometimes they just don't want to know. Well, they want to know about Jesus, and they want to know something about Him. They want to read a little bit about Him, but they don't want to know Him. Because knowing Him takes us to different levels, different depths. Paul isn't talking about an entry level of knowing Jesus here. So I'm going to give you a sneak preview again. He's not talking about an entry level. Well, I want to read about Jesus and write some books about Jesus and write some letters to some churches about Jesus. And I want to do that, but you know what? I'm going to live like I want to live. No, Paul, you're living like Jesus wants you to live. Because you realize if He hadn't been locked down, we wouldn't have epistles today. So Paul is saying, hey, look, I understand the process. I understand that God's got to get me in a place to where I can give the world something to move on and to build their doctrines upon and to know how to serve Him. So knowing someone is different than knowing about them. Well, I know all about some things. I read University of Tennessee news every morning. I know all about that. I don't know those people. I don't know anything about them other than just, I couldn't tell you if they're left-handed or right-handed. I couldn't tell you where they live, what they drive. I just know a little bit about the sports that's going on. See, knowing someone is different than knowing about them. Knowing someone is different than knowing their history. Knowing someone is different than knowing some fun facts about them. See, Paul says, know Jesus in these three levels that we're getting ready, well, not six, but three. In these three levels that we're getting ready to talk about, and you'll understand the heart of Christ. Because you ain't got somebody's back until you know their heart. So let's look at those three levels. So notice with me level number one, power. Power. Now, who doesn't want to know somebody that's going to implement and impart and inject into them a level of power? So I want to know Jesus in resurrection power. So Paul starts out with what seems to be the pinnacle of the knowing. But he starts out with it. He doesn't end with it, he starts out with it. See, I think it's backward, but I think he's got it backward on purpose. I want to know Him in a powerful way. Paul starts out like this. He starts out with the pinnacle that we feel like of knowing Jesus, and the power of His resurrection was an evidencing power. We're going to look at that. It was a justifying power. We're going to look at that. It was a life-giving power. We're going to look at that, and a comforting power. So let me show you what those look like. It's evidenced in His truth. There's our evidence. That's that evidencing power. It's the proof of His sacrifice. There's our justification power. It's the connection to His victory. That's our life-giving power. It's the promise of His of life. That's our comforting power. So, I say it all the time. You don't want money. People say, well, I want a bunch of money. You don't want money. You want the peace that you think is attached to the money. I don't want a new wife because the old one's getting older. I just want the peace that I feel like might be attached to the new wife, which won't be, by the way. So, I don't want a new vehicle. I just want the peace that's attached with the new vehicle. So, Paul leads out with a level that is power level that we feel like should be the highest, but it's not the highest level. It's the deepest. Paul's not taking us higher. He's taking us deeper. And let me tell you something. Both of them require something, but deeper is a little different than going higher. Paul's not talking about higher here. He's talking about let's go in deeper. It's the first level is power. We're not getting to the other levels. We're not getting to levels 2 and 3 without going through level 1. We're not getting to level 1 without going through level 1, 2, and 3. We're not getting there. You can't cherry pick what you like. So the second level of depth of knowing Jesus is suffering. Now, it's like, hey, I want to know Jesus. I want to know Him. I want to be able to walk into a room. I want to go to that platform and I want to be able to speak Jesus and I want to see people healed. Well, do you want to suffer and clean the toilets? Well, I didn't ask for all that. Do you want to drive the church van? Now, wait a minute. Now, I said this is what I wanted to do. Yeah, you want the power part of it, but we want to bypass the suffering part of it. So I'm just telling you, you're not a bad person. I am. I'm telling you, every one of us are like this. We want that power part of Jesus, but we don't want that suffering part of Him. So here's, King James says the fellowship of his sufferings, and the ESV says the sharing in his sufferings, which basically are the same thing. But notice he didn't say suffering, he said sufferings. So he said, look, the sufferings that are attached to knowing Jesus are plural, and you're not going to do it one time and get it behind you. So we're not just going to be, okay, well, you know what? Whew, man, I got that suffering part out of the way. Now it's to the pulpit to preach a sermon. So you know what? It's like, look, we've got to know him in this way before we can know him in this way. We truly won't know someone. Let me just give you this one. We truly won't know someone until we've known them in their deepest places of suffering. Until you've sat on a couch and put your arms around someone and felt their brokenness because of a death or because of a diagnosis, because of something, a breakup. We don't know that person until we felt their suffering. And that's when, let me just say, no pain, no gain, right? No pain, no gain. See, muscle doesn't grow because we work it out and break it down once. I'm a prime example of that. Here's my theory on working out, Stephen. Here's my theory. I would work out more, but I find the weights are too heavy. So let me have my theory, right? Okay, so see, muscle doesn't grow because we break it down once. Muscle grows because it is broken down and it suffers change every day. And it gets stronger and begins to get stronger. Here's the question. Why does suffering have to be a required substance in order to be a follower of Jesus? Well, I don't know if I want to sign up for that one. Teacher, why is it that I have to suffer in order to be a follower? Why is that a required substance? Because I don't know if I want to do that or not. Well, let me give you the answer to that. Following Jesus is becoming like him in power. Following Jesus and becoming like him in power are two different things. Anybody can follow somebody, but if I'm going to be like him in power, then I'm going to have to be like him in suffering. Yeah. I can't just pick what I like. So, are we going to be a follower of Jesus that's at a distance because I'm afraid if I get closer, the weights are going to be heavy? You know what I mean? I got to get closer to Jesus. I'm not going to really know him until I'm really close with him. So, following Jesus and becoming like him, that's just two different things. That's two different things. So, second answer to that is, what level of suffering is required to experience this kind of relationship? I just go back. I'll go to a marriage relationship. Well, you know what? I'll never forget the day that I came home with my dad's diagnosis that he's not going to live. You know what? My wife and I had to work through that suffering. And when we worked through that suffering, we knew each other better and better. You know, I called a friend. During this time, I called a friend. We were standing at the island at the house we used to have, and I called a friend at a different church and was going to ask them to pray. All I could do was cry, and I handed the phone to Tina, and she knew what I was going to ask them, and she completed the request because we knew each other, because we had experienced that level of suffering together. See, what level of suffering is required to experience this kind of relationship? What are those things in your life and in my life that we know and that we feel are at war with Christ? Because some of those things are the things that are keeping us from suffering with Jesus. They're some of the things that are causing us suffering, and we don't realize it. See, this is usually the level of knowing God that we want to bypass. It's like, I'm going to circumvent that one. I feel like I know that part. I'm going to go right on from there. See, we want to go around because the requirements in our hearts are too great. I don't want to know Jesus to that level. And we have sat down with people and have told us that. Well, I don't want to go deeper with Jesus. You don't want to what? I don't want to go deeper with Jesus. I'm as deep as I want to go. Well, what if you told your wife, your husband that? I don't want to know you any more than I know you. See, I did that with a guitar one time. Somebody said, you need to learn these chords. I'm like, I learn all I want to learn. Give me a capo, we'll play. I don't want to learn anymore. I'm fine. See, we can't be that with Jesus. I want to go deeper with the Lord. And for us to say I don't want to go deeper is to say, look, I don't appreciate our relationship. See, many of us want to blow up the world for Christ. I want to blow up the world for Christ. Man, I want people to know that Jesus lives in me. I want to blow up the world for Christ. But we're smothering the fuse with everything that we do and say. We're smothering the fuse. You know what? You can't get the blow up without letting the fuse burn. See, we're determined to smother the fuse. If we get this part right, we can get back to blowing up for the world for Christ. But I'm going to tell you, it's not going to happen. You're not going to stand in power with Jesus without suffering for Jesus, because people will see it. Power is built upon suffering. And we're not going to, I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom. I'm just saying we can't bypass life. We can't bypass situations. You know, you can't get a diagnosis and say, I refuse to accept this. You just can't do that. Life's not like that. See, so level 1 is power, level 2 is suffering, and the third level of depth is death. Now, Paul is writing this letter chained to a floor in a prison that's cold and dripping and all this other stuff, and he's thrown a little bit of rations, throughout the day, maybe the week, to live on, and then he's writing this and saying, man, I just want to know Jesus more than I've ever known him before. And Paul, you've been in prison for 2 years because of him. Yeah, I just want to know him more. I just want to know him deeper. I want to know him in the level of suffering. I want to understand his suffering. I want to understand what it's like to die for him. Well, Paul, you're going to find that out. I'm pretty sure that maybe he knew that. See, only very few creatures, talking about depth, only very few creatures live at the deepest depths of the ocean. There's not very many things can live down there. Here's why. It's darkest. Its pressure's greater. It's cold. It's lonely. See, the depths of knowing Jesus, maybe sometimes they're a little scary to us, because we don't understand it. It's a little bit unknown. It's dark. The pressure's greater to go deeper with the Lord. See, Luke chapter 9, verse 23, Jesus just gives us point blank. If anyone wants to come after me, they got to deny themselves, take up their crosses on a daily basis, and follow after me. If you want to know me in this fashion, then you're going to have to come after me on a daily basis. You're going to have to pick up your cross on a daily basis, and you're going to have to follow after me. See, carrying the cross is the deepest level of knowing Jesus. It's recognizing what needs to be killed in us. See, we want to circumvent number 2, and we don't want to do number 3 at all. We don't want to do number 3 at all. You know, I'm going to be honest with you. We don't have any problem whatsoever suffering for Jesus. I'll suffer for Jesus on the mission field. Lord, I'll go to the Bahamas. I'll go to Hawaii. Lord, I'll even go anywhere where there's a beach. I mean, we want to pick and choose our level of suffering. But then we don't want to do the death part at all, because here's what Jesus is saying. If we're going to go deeper with me, let me just say, then I'll give you the practical application. If you're going to go deeper with me, then you're going to have to kill things in you that you're worshiping. Let me go back to the husband and wives, because I feel like we know this a lot. Not this, but I feel like we know how to be married. We do it very well. So let me just give you this situation. I'm just going to throw it out there. Am I crazy for thinking this? If you want you and I to have a relationship in a marriage, you got to quit dating other guys. I mean, stop telling me that you're going, stop telling me that about your girlfriends. I'm telling you, if she's got any sense about her at all, then she ain't marrying you. So here's the thing. Jesus is saying, you got to kill some things in you. And Paul is saying, I want to know Jesus to the point that I'm willing to kill the want in me and suffer for him. I mean, think about that. I don't care. My life is an instrument for Him, and He can use it how He pleases. And if it means being chained down and locked down, and if I have to kill every desire in me, you know what? I haven't seen my wife. I haven't seen my family. I haven't been able to make money. I don't even know if I have a business left. Speaking from Paul's perspective, I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know what's happening in the world. I don't even know they had a Facebook. Paul's like, I didn't even know there was such a thing. There you go, see? So, it's recognizing what needs to be killed in us. It's dying to the things that keep us with floaties on. See, you ain't going deep as long as you got them floaties on your arm. Here's what's going to happen if you go out with floaties. You're going to get sunburned, all except for right there. And you're going to look dumb. See, in floaties, you can't go down because they keep bobbing you back up. Here, if we're going to go deeper with Jesus, we got to pull off the floaties. And the floaties are the things that we want to keep because we're secure in those. See, we want to be secure in something. And Jesus says, you got to step off and not know where you're going to land in order to have the faith to walk with me. There's only one way to carry our cross. That's to shake off the heaviness that weighs us down. In other words, pull off our floaties and let's go deeper. See, the cross is heavy enough. Remember this. The cross is heavy enough by itself without adding our heaviness to it. I mean, why do we want to? It's heavy enough without adding all of our junk to it. And Jesus says, pick up that thing daily. In other words, if you're picking up your cross daily, I promise you, you're dropping some stuff that you would like to carry with you. You know what? I'm really starting to think that my stuff's not that important to carry. When the ship's under attack and they're saying throw everything overboard, everything that you don't want goes over first. And when the ship's about to sink, everything that you can live without goes over second. And when the ship's bow is underwater, everything that you love and you can't do without goes over. So in other words, I'm going to dump it all in order to save myself. And then the ship comes back up and starts bobbing. See, the cross is heavy enough without adding more weight to it. Guys, if we're going to know Jesus, we can't skip levels in the process. So worship team, if you guys, I don't know if you got my cue or not, so I need you up here. See, knowing about Jesus is not the same as knowing Him. Know that you know that you know. Know the levels of depth of knowing Him. So, just knowing about Him, that's not good enough. I mean, my word. Some of you guys in here, I'm just going to pick out some name. I mean, hey, some of you guys in here, y'all know baseball players. Y'all know football players. You can tell all about them. You just know about them, that's all. Some of you younger guys, I'd be afraid to even say a name because I'd get it wrong. But you know about them because you've read about them. You have it on your phone every day. You just know about them, but you don't know them. Jesus says, know that you know that you know. He says it through Paul. Know that you know that you know. We can't cherry pick what we want from Jesus. I'll take a little bit of that. I got my little basket. I'll take a little bit of power. I take a little bit more power. Here's a little bit more power. Here's some suffering. No, I'm going to bypass on that. Here's some knowing Him to the things I got to die to. No, I'm not ready for that. I got some power in my basket. But Jesus says, look, you got to get it all or you don't get any of it. So we can't want Him in power and reject Him in suffering. So I'm going to reject Him in suffering. I want Him in power. See, let's go deep. Let's go deep. And deep is always unknown, and it's always a bit scary. It always pushes us to the place of uncomfortableness. And it's always a place where you have to hold your breath a little longer. So while you're contemplating that, when I was a kid, we would go to the bluffs. That's all we could afford to do. Nobody had a boat, so we'd go to the bluffs. We'd dive off the bluffs, and I remember we got this idea. Let's get this big rock. We kept grabbing these big flat rocks. We get these rocks, and we got them out in the water. Let's dive in with them, and see who can hang on the longest. Because in our mind, that old quarry was, 500,000 feet deep, and it had no bottom, and stuff was down there that would eat you. Probably is, but that rock would pull you down, and you'd see people letting go of it, and you're thinking, I ain't letting go of this rock. But then you got to thinking, I don't know if I have enough breath to get back up. It would always get darker. It would always get colder. And it would always get scarier. Going deeper with the Lord, it's always going to get scarier, guys. But I'm not going to know until I grab the rock and jump in the water. I'm just not going to know. And the unknown requires faith. I say it all the time. Faith is the thing that you don't know how hard it is to use it until you have to use it. So, if we're going to go deeper, let's go deeper. If we're not going to go deeper, stand on the bank and wish you did. Just all there is to it. So, won't you stand with me? And I'm going to ask you, first of all, let's get that entry level of knowing Jesus and ask Him into our heart. Because, my gosh, what are we doing? What are we doing? I hope I don't rock your theology here, but your life, God didn't give you life so you could just spend it on yourself. He gave you life, number one, so you could choose in this time stamp where you're going to spend eternity. But number two is how many people we're going to take with us. My friend always would say, and I quote it all the time, I'll go to heaven without you, but I'd really rather go with you. I want to go with you. So I want you to go. So I want you to know Jesus. And you say, well, I'm not ready to give up stuff. Don't worry about that. Because relationship is a process. Jesus is not asking you to dump the bucket today. He's asking you to bring the bucket to Him. And in time, you and Him will work on the bucket. Hey, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for spending some time with us in service at Christpoint Church. And just wanting you to know that we love you guys and you are an important part of Christpoint Church. If you're disconnected or in another state or you want more updates, please visit us on our website. You can email us at info@christpoint.church. And if you want to know how to give, we have a text to give. You can see it flashing right now. Also, you can give on the app. A lot of people are asking about that. So we just want you to know that you are a vital and important part of Christpoint Church. Now, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us online and on TV. We are real people, living real lives, serving a real God. Welcome home.